Welcome to the Capes and Tights podcast. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. This week, we talked to Rich Koslowski, who is the author and illustrator of F.A.R.M system over at Top Shelf. It's a graphic novel published and distributed by IDW. Great graphic novel about a minor league system for superheroes, in a sense. Rich explains it better when we talk about the podcast. But before we get on there, visit us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as capesandtights.com for a ton of information, news articles, opinions, reviews, and so much more. And make sure you subscribe, rate, and review and all that stuff over at Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please, 5 stars. We're here for episodes with Rich Koslowski. Enjoy, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am excellent. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Happy MLK Junior Day.
Yes, exactly. It's one of those weird things that I woke up and I brought my son to daycare, or not daycare, who babysits him. And I was like, where are the other girls that are here? It's a school, no school today. I'm like, what's no school today? And they're like, oh, it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I'm like, oh, awesome. Thanks for keeping my calendar for me.
Yes, exactly.
It's horrible here in Maine. I'm in Maine right now, and it is sleet, freezing rain, grossness right now. So I'm glad to be inside. I tell you that much.
Yeah, I'm in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, just out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and it has been gray and rainy. Beautiful weather. Last week it's been like this, but it's better than 20 below and ice. So I'll take it.
I'm always a colder person anyway. I don't really I don't want to sweat. So if I'm cool with being, bundled up inside when it's cold outside, I'm good. That's why I like to live in Maine. We don't ever get to the point where we're really warm. But we're not here to talk weather. We're here to talk comic books and graphic novels and your creations, I guess. But before we get too far into it, how did you get into comic books as a reader of comic books?
Very vivid memory that occurred to me in a flashback, actually. So I had repressed this memory. It's kind of a fun little story. Mm-hmm. I'll give you the nutshell version. I was already collecting comics, loving comics, everything, going to shows, and I was at Motor City Comic Con in 1990, and I was going through a back issue bin, and I saw this comic and my heart just froze, and I had one of those moments where the camera oops at you. It was a Giant Size Superstars #1 with the Thing and the Hulk fighting on the cover. And I was like, all these memories came flooding back to me. That was the very first comic I bought. And why I repressed the memory of it was because it was all at once the most amazing day of my life and horrible, because I bought the comic book at the grocery store my dad ran the butcher shop out of in the back. He subleased the butcher shop and made a successful career out of that. But anyways, I was walking with my mom, say hi to Dad before I go to the dentist. And we were walking by the magazine rack, and I was only like 6 or 7. And I was like, boom, what the hell is that? I saw colorful images on these paper magazines. I'm like, what is that? And that's my first exposure to comic books. And it was that comic book. And I bought it. My mom bought it for me for the quarter or whatever. I read it on the way to the dentist. As I was waiting at the dentist, I was looking at this thing, just mesmerized. And I was called in, and I left my comic book on the table there with my mom. They gassed me up. They drilled a cavity. I left all woozy, and I forgot my comic book until I was halfway home. And then it started to wear off the gas. I'm like, Mom, my comic book, we have to go back. We have to go back. She's like, Richard, we're not turning around to go back for a 25-cent comic book. So I repressed that horrifying memory, until that day at Motor City Con. So of course I'm holding this comic, remembering this story, and the guy had like $15 on it. I go, here's 20.
Yeah.
Keep the change.
I was going to ask whether or not you paid 25 cents for the one at the Comic Con. Yeah. Guess not. We got up the price a little bit now.
That was my, as a kid, that was my addiction. I got hooked on them, and I always was just reading them at the store. I was getting kicked out. It's not a library, kid. I'm like, my dad runs the butcher shop. Leave me alone. Oh, all right.
Yeah, and I just love hearing what people's introductions into comic books, and I will say that everyone's is different, and that's a great one. And you obviously went from wanting to read them to illustrating and writing. What do you call yourself? You call yourself a comic creator, a cartoonist, an illustrator? What is your title you give each other people?
Yeah, when people ask me what I do for a living, I write out flat out, just say I'm a comic book illustrator and writer.
Okay.
Cartoonist, but yeah, I'm very proud of that moniker. I know back there was a time where people would be like, well, I'm an illustrator, and not say they do comic books. I'm like, I write and draw comics, man. And they're like, really? That is so cool. I'm like, it's not the worst job. Yeah.
Well, it's a job that keeps people busy. I've talked to a number of people who will say they're the busiest they've ever been just because they have their hands in so many different projects, and it pays the bills, right? I mean, that's what, and you're happy about it, and you're excited to be a comic book illustrator. That's what's makes it good, not just the fact that you like get paid the bills. It's because you like doing it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
Awesome. That's awesome. And so obviously you go in from transitioning from collecting or reading to illustrating. When did that flip? When did that become like, this is what you wanted to do?
Right. So I'm reading comics. I'm getting the Electric Company magazine with Spidey Adventures. I don't know if you remember the Electric Company. It came on after Sesame Street. Then it was the Electric Company, and they had a little short. With Spidey, and he never talked, and he shot this web netting. And hey, Morgan Freeman started on that show too. You should look it up. He was the easy reader. He was cool. Anyways, Spidey was in the Electric Company magazine, and I was always tracing Spider-Man. But in second grade, I was starting to get really good at drawing like dragsters and stuff. And my friends would always, hey, can you draw me a car? And I was kind of like, hey, yeah, sure. They want me to draw them a picture. Cool. But by fourth grade, I was locked in. That's when I really realized, kids aren't stupid. We hung our art up on the board at Thanksgiving and stuff. And I'm like looking around at the other kids like, oh, man, they suck. Mine is way better than that one. Right. And I was like, I'm pretty good at this. Me and my one other friend, CJ Bettine, he's still my friend to this day, but we were really good compared to the other kids. And I just wanted to draw all day. And I was the classic consummate underachiever who never paid attention and was always drawing instead of taking notes. So really from fourth grade on, people would ask me, what are you going to do when you grow up? I'm going to draw comic books. I'm going to draw comic books. They would look at me like, what the heck is that? Is that even a real thing? So yeah. And then seventh grade, eighth grade, I started to really develop and discovered Mr. John Byrne. And I was like, that's when I started paying attention to who the writers and artists were. And in the credits. Before then, I didn't care about the credits. I barely read the caption boxes. Sometimes I found those to be boring. They slogged down the story. Well, obviously it was critical, and I realized, I've got to read those yellow boxes. But yeah, I'm reading some X-Men comic, and I'm like, what am I looking at here? What is going on? This doesn't look like the last comic or whatever. And a writer, artist, who's this John Byrne guy?
Yes.
Great. And then I started to pay attention to who's the writer? What's an inker? What the heck's an inker or an embellisher? And then I started paying attention and realizing which artists and writers I was gravitating towards. Then I started to look up their past work. In eighth grade, the nearest comic book store was like 9 miles away. My mom to this day wants to strangle me. I used to take my little single speed dirt bike and drive down into the bowels of Milwaukee to this comic book store on my single speed bike without her knowing about it. She thought I was at my friend's house to buy comic books. And I was getting the back issues then. So yeah, I started following favorite artists, and that's when I really knew.
It's funny when there's that switch and that it clicks, the difference between these just exist. They just happen to be on the shelf, to the realization that there's a person who actually works on them in the back end. And in your mind, you hear art, the artwork is done by so-and-so, but not realizing there's, pencilers, inkers, flatters. There's all these different people who go in to do these things, to make these things come out on a rack. And the fact that back in the day, when you bought that 25-cent comic book, that people read them and threw them away. That's even crazier to me, that all this work goes into this piece of artwork, that a lot of people, the original people read it and go, okay, we're done with it. And then just toss it in the trash. Like, it just fascinates me. That's what used to happen. Like, I have hundreds of books that I probably will never read again, but I can't get myself. I mean, obviously I paid $4 or $5 for them, but I can't get myself to throw them away because I bought this. I want to own this.
I can't throw them away either, even if they're really bad. Then I go to a lot of cons, and every once in a while I go to the cons and bring back issues and have my quarter box, and I can't throw these away. Somebody else needs them. My parents threw them away.
Yes.
I remind them to this day, you realize when you threw away all those early X-Men issues of mine, how much they're worth now?
Yes.
You know?
Well, it's funny because we joke a lot. I have a regular on the podcast. His name is Paul Eaton. He owns the local comic book shop in my area. And he comes on and talks about how my parents threw away an entire long box of my comic books when they moved from place to place. The only issue that they kept was the death of Superman. And we joke because I'm thinking to myself, it actually might be the least valuable comic book that was in that box, because I got my copy back to me technically because I gave it away a while ago for free on Free Comic Book Day. My buddy Paul goes, I have 4 of these. Who wants them? And just handed them out to people. I'm like, that's the comic book my mom thought, one of these days it's going to be worth millions. Thanks, Mom.
The 90s, the
yes.
glut, the death of comics in the 90s. Yes.
I mean, she tried. She thought she was helping, but nowadays to this thing, I'm like, there's no comic book in here I can throw away. I mean, I gave a buddy of mine a bag of comic books that I was just trying to get rid of for his son. And it's still to this day, every once in a while, I go, I don't remember what was in that. I'm wondering what was in that. Was there anything that I really want to have now that I didn't care about 5 years ago?
Right.
Hopefully he gets into comic books because of that. And that's it. Moving on. Right. But you obviously started drawing your own things so you started as an animator. Is that true? Am I wrong?
Yeah, at a small company in Franksville, Wisconsin. That's just 30 minutes south of Milwaukee area. Franksville, Wisconsin, a small company called Animagination. And we were doing TV commercials and doing really well with them. A lot of local TV ads and some Illinois companies and so forth. And some way or another, we tripped upon storyboard art for Sega and Sonic the Hedgehog and some other Street Sharks, Double Dragon, all these really cool shows. Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, which was awesome. They changed the title, I don't remember. But anyways, the Sonic thing came along. And we were all like, what the heck is this? This is kind of weird, but fun. You think it'll make it? I don't know. Well, here we are today,
Yeah.
30 years later. But anyways, we're working on the comic, the TV show, and that was fun. The kid from did the voice of Urkel. Remember that show back in the day? He was the voice of Sonic. And the Sega people enjoyed our work so much on the storyboards that they contacted Archie Comics, who had just gotten the contract to do the comic book series. They were about 10 issues in, and they contacted Archie and said, hey, these 2 guys doing the storyboards, Art Mawhinney, who was my boss, and me, we want them to do work on the comics as well. And I had dreamed about getting into comics. Of course, my dream was Marvel, DC. Yeah. But I read Archie as a kid. I always liked Archie and Jughead and Betty and Veronica. And so I was like, Archie's doing Sonic the comic, and heck yeah, if this can get me into comics, I'll take it. So we got in a very weird way into my dream job, which was working on Sonic. So I started on issue 12 as an inker and worked up until about issue 50. I wrote a couple stories, penciled, primarily did inks. And Archie was so happy with my work on Sonic that then they started having me do all the regular titles as well. So I've worked on thousands of Archie comics. Yeah. And
you're still working on Archie stuff now, or?
Yeah, they don't do very much these days. Yeah. Print wise, they just mostly are doing their digests, and they're getting back into some more limited release series, but they stopped publishing quite drastically about 5 years ago. But I've been able to work on some of the really cool Archie versus Predator crossover. Yeah. The Archie meets Kiss was cool. Archie Sharknado, that actually happened. And every once in a while, every few months, they'll shoot me a little bit of work, a 6-pager here and there. But it's pretty few and far between these days. But still, I'm still in the family. They're a great company to work for. They've been fantastic to me.
I love the more obscure, crazy collaborations or fights than the actual ones that make more sense. Like I think recently they just did another one at Boom. Was it the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers together? I'm like, okay, I can understand that collaboration together. But the Archie and the Sharknado thing, those are the kind of things that that would never happen. Let's put it in a comic book and do something with it.
Yeah, and they didn't hold back either. I'm like, Archie versus Predator. How are we going to do this? How are we going to do this and keep it G-rated? I got the first pencils. I'm like, whoa, we're not keeping it G-rated. The Predator is eviscerating people in this book. Okay, here we go.
That's awesome. But You have multiple books you've done yourself, though. So, we obviously are here to talk farm system. So we can just jump into that. Can you give me your elevator pitch? If we were in the elevator together, what would you pitch me? How would you pitch me farm system?
Minor league baseball meets superheroes. These guys don't just go out there and start kicking villains' asses. Some agent figured it out a long time ago. Hey, these guys need health and dental too. If they're going to get their teeth kicked in, they should have contracts that cover this stuff, benefits and so forth. But it's a minor league system for superheroes. They get agents, they get trained, marketing strategies, costume branding, all that stuff they learn, just like minor league baseball players, sensitivity training and all the stuff they shouldn't be doing because they're a brand now. Everything's about branding and
yes.
money. Not everybody's Tony Stark or Bruce Wayne. They can afford to be Batman or Iron Man on their own dime. These guys, they need to make an income. So I look at it as, what are the guys in the farm system, the minor leagues? What's their story? And my focus is mainly on most of the guys who never make it to the big leagues.
Mm-hmm.
That's the interest of this. Let's hear about those B and C characters that are pretty powerful, but maybe just not powerful enough or marketable enough.
I loved it because of the fact that I'm a big, my son's name is Nova. And so my son being named Nova is a connection, obviously, to like Richard Rider, but also Sam Alexander and there was a whole series of outlaw comic books at Marvel where they did this, like, you're too young to be fighting crime and you have to be a certain age and all this other stuff. So it connected that to, like, I like that storyline they had there. But then what you two did was almost take that the simple connection to it and expand it to the point where Marvel would never go, which is agents and having profitability and making money off of it and stuff like that. So I love that connection that you just think, oh, I want to be a superhero tomorrow, and I want to be a superhero, and I want to be able to afford to fight crime and have a lair and all these things if I just got superpowers tomorrow. And so that I love that aspect of the fact that I'm a big minor league. I covered minor league baseball in Lowell, Massachusetts. I covered for the Lowell Spinners. And so that connection also, I love that, taking two of my passions and smashing together. Are you a baseball fan? Is that where this came from? Or okay.
Yeah. I'm a big baseball fan. I love baseball. I love documentaries about baseball. The Ken Burns thing blew my mind years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That actually prompted me to do my other book with Top Shelf Fingers. But back to my love of baseball, sports, and that whole structure. I'm always one of those sympathetic, empathetic people too, that I always feel bad for the guys who don't make it. And I wonder why didn't they make it? What little, Tom Brady was almost not drafted in football, and he's the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
He almost didn't get a gig. So I wonder how many of those guys that floundered all those years just never got the break that they should have gotten. And that's kind of what I touch upon in my book with Farm System. And you and me, writers in comic books or artists in comic books. I've met a ton of great artists and going to shows, and I'm like, why aren't you big leagues? What? Sometimes it is just who you know. Sometimes it's that connection or whatever. Unfortunately, that's the truth. And a lot of talented people have fallen by the wayside because they've gotten frustrated and just couldn't afford to keep trying. And I plumb the depths of that in Farm System too, about these guys who never give up on their dream. They keep going after it, sometimes with, less than desirable results. But that's the story I wanted to tell.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny. I like to see that. And, that reminds me of when I was working for the Lowell Spinners organization, that's when Mookie Betts played there. And when Mookie Betts played there, he was honestly, if you were to tell me then, this guy's going to be one of the highest paid players in baseball, I would have been like, I'll put money on it. He won't, because he wasn't. He was getting thrown out at second all the time. It was back when he played second base, and he just wasn't hitting very well. He just wasn't an amazing player. He wasn't the best player on the team for sure. And then, fast forward a number of years, and now he's out in LA making millions and millions and millions of dollars. It's that story on how he got this. So it's not always obvious of these players being good or bad at the minor league level. It takes some time to get there, and focusing on the people who didn't make it. Again, I also covered Lowell, UMass Lowell, the University of Massachusetts Lowell, and every once in a while they get a player drafted, and so you follow that player because you're like, oh my gosh, this never happens to this university, and they're a lot of the players that don't end up making it. So
Yeah.
seeing their Mendick, though, actually, they just got signed again to a contract. I think he's playing for the Mets now, but whatever. He was, again, one of those ones, one of the few that actually made it from UMass Lowell. So it's always fun watching these players that are not the greatest and see where they end up in playing in major leagues.
Yeah, and I like the agents too, the villains story, the Scott Borases of the sports world, the Jerry Maguires, I want to know more about those guys and their assistants and their lawyers and what they do, what schemy, sleazy things they're cooking up in the back room with these deals, and the costume designers, the guys who are in charge of naming rights. Everything's been trademarked these days. Coming up with a good name for a superhero is almost impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things I touch on in the book.
Oh, they dealt with that a little bit on. Did you see the She-Hulk series? They did that a little bit.
Not started. I just started episode 1 a couple days ago, actually.
Okay. But I won't spoil it for you that much. But there's a thing in there about the trademark name of She-Hulk, and I laugh at that too, and it makes you think about, you watch these Iron Man movies or these, the Batman, and you're like, yeah, anybody could just technically call themselves Batman unless you go to the actual lawyers and get the lawyers involved, get it trademarked, copyrighted, and things like that. Like you just, up until a point, obviously there's this, you've been using it for long enough and so on and so forth. But like, yeah, these names need to be monetized in this sense. That's what they should focus. Like in the movies, they do focus on some of these things, like, Anthony Mackie in Captain Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where he's trying to get a loan and they wouldn't give him a loan because, like, you don't make any money as an Avenger. Sorry. They should focus more on that.
That's the kind of stuff I find very fascinating. Yeah. And I want to plumb those depths a little bit more. And I'm going to do it in book 2 because I just got greenlit for the second book. So that's
there you
cool.
Go. Speaking of that, I'm a floppy guy. I love floppy comics. But more recently, I would say the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been getting into some trade paperbacks of issues that I don't want to worry about trying to collect the 4 or 5 issues of each trade, or the original graphic novels. And is there a reason why you go a specific way, or is it just what you like doing, like between graphic novel and potentially releasing this as single issues?
We talked about it, and with Chris Staros, who is also not only my editor and publisher, but he's my friend. He's got the backs of his artists and writers more than a lot of editors in this industry, and he deserves a lot of credit for that and accolades. But I said, what would you think about releasing it as floppy, sequential? And he's just like, that's just not Top Shelf, the publisher's brand. We like chunk big books. And I was like, great. Either way, I'm fine with it. Just wanted to throw it out there at him. And then after book 1, and the reviews were coming in really nice, said, hey, I'd like to do book 2. And he's like, we have to see how the sales go a little bit first. I'm like, totally understand. I said, and we could revisit the idea of floppies again, the single issues. I can format it either way. So we talked about it again. And just last week, he greenlit book 2 and just said, let's do another full-length graphic, just because that fits their aesthetic more and their brand. I'm fine with
it's also great. Like, I love the floppies, but I also understand the model behind a graphic novel or a trade paperback because of the fact that it's a one complete story. It's a chunk of story. You don't have to wait month to month to month. I find myself every month reading the last issue again, to get to the second issue. And if I had a graphic novel of it, I would just read the whole thing straight through and not have to worry about it. I won't forget where I am because I can read it the next night or whatever. But it's the way the world is. Actually, I think we're never going to get rid of individual issues, but I do think the trade paperback and graphic novel game is going to grow and grow and grow over the next 5-10 years, just because of people's impatientness to wait month to month. And also it can be a savings in cost. If this book F.A.R.M System ended up being 6 or 7 issues, and your price tag was $19.95, say, it's actually going to be cheaper to buy a trade or a graphic novel than it is single issues too. So I think that's where we're going anyway.
Yeah, it's a $20 book, but it's 208 pages, and it's literally like 10. It's like almost 10 issues of a comic book, or 6, 7 issues. And I've told people that, and they're like, oh, $20. I'm like, well, if it was a comic book split into 8 issues, it would be like $35. My biggest problem collecting the floppies these days is when I walk into a comic book store, I'm confused as hell. How many Bat titles are there now? Yes. What is a 30 Bat? man, comics, where do I start? And there used to be 4, and I thought 4 was a lot when Batman, Shadow of the Bat, Detective, and then the X-Men. When I was a kid, it was beautiful. There was 1 a month.
Yeah.
Avengers, 1 a month. Fantastic Four, 1. Simple, man. I can do this. Then 2 or 3. Now there's like how many Avengers titles? Huh? I don't know where to start. I'm overwhelmed. I'm just like, shut down. Let's go look through the trade paperback routes and racks and get some. That's the way I'm going more and more.
It's crazy, and it's a I mean, they're like, it takes up less room. You can protect them easier. It's easier to hold. It's a lot that goes into that. Also, I think there's a lot more people who are following specific creators. Like, Rich, if I was like, I want to follow your work to collect, like, let you write and draw an entire book. Let me collect that 1 book this year, or maybe 2 you put out, and be good. Where all these different creators are touching 17 different single issue things, and you're trying to follow where they are. It's kind of crazy, in my opinion. Like, there's just definitely a simplicity to having someone who's like, I'm going to write a graphic novel. I'll see you in a year, that kind of thing, where it's much more concise.
Yeah, and it got difficult for me again too. I was doing so many shows pre-COVID that I was always hip to what was coming out from the shows, not the stores or the preview catalog.
Yeah.
I just would work the room and be like, oh, you got a new book out? Yeah, bring it on. Or go to my favorite publishers, Drawn and Quarterly, Top Shelf, Fantagraphics, whatever, and Oni Press. And hey, what's going on with you guys? With Dark Horse, what do you got going on? Oh, shoot, I haven't gotten these in a while. I'll buy a couple trade paperbacks. And that's where I would load up at the shows, bring back a short box of all my stuff. And then the shows stopped, and I'm like out of the loop. That's when I went back to the comic book stores, and I was like, what the hell?
Well, I listened to a podcast. A buddy of mine has a podcast called the Off Panel Podcast, David Harper, and he did a piece for his website, sketch.com, about number of variant covers for comic books. And he said, but if you took every single, so like, for example, Saga doesn't have any variant covers. There's a couple of like issues 2 through 5 of certain series that don't have variant covers. Maybe issue 1 does, but the rest of this. He said, on average, out of all the books that came out in 2022 and all the variants, 3.5 covers per issue is like with the number of covers. He says, so like 3.5 to 4 covers per issue. So every single issue had 3.5, 4 covers behind it. It's insane. How are you supposed? And I'm a completionist. So like, to me, I'm like, oh my God, this is not even, I cannot get, my buddy Ben Bishop did The Last Ronin. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll collect all the issue ones. There's like 110 of them or something like that. I'm like, there's no way. Can't do it. So it's insane. That's what graphic, trade paperbacks and graphic novels are usually, this is the cover. Buy it. You're good. Simplicity.
And I get it why a lot of publishers are doing it.
Oh yeah.
Overall numbers of books are down, so they have to do the variants to generate some more income and the collectability, the uniqueness of it all. But it does get a little out of control sometimes.
But I mean, if you did one for your website, for an example, like you're selling your F.A.R.M system book, and you're like, okay, this is the exclusive one for my website, and this is the one that's going into stores. I think that is cool in that sense that, like, if I have a big follower of you, I can go to your website, buy one directly from you. This is cool. But like, when you have 30, 40 issues, first issue, 30 or 40 covers, I just can't even keep track of it. I'm using the search feature on my computer to see if I go to like Previews World and just trying to find whether or not one of my favorite artists is having a variant cover this month by using a search feature on the thing to see if I can find it. Is how you have to do it. If it wasn't, but I was just looking through Previews catalog, I think I would be lost on where all these things are and things. So it's crazy. But my buddy who owns a comic book shop has started, let's see, back in October, maybe it was September, we started a graphic novel club. And so the graphic novel club is every month, once a month, a group of people read a book, and we get together once a month and discuss said book. And it's gotten me, I now own 5 or 6 trades that I never would have owned because I either have single issues or I just wouldn't have thought about picking it up. And I love that aspect of it because now my book collection is getting bigger just because of that too. So, and it's forcing me into books. Like, you should read this book. Let's get this book. And I have been buying trades that way. So I am getting more into the trades field and the graphic novel field, but single issues are still always going to be my love.
Oh yeah, and I still get them. Get them, and I'll find something new. Like Marvel just came out with their new Namor
Yeah.
series. I think it's at issue 4, 5, 6. I'm loving that. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
wow. Glad I found it though when I did. I just happened to find it. Hey, new Namor one. Didn't they just do a Namor one a couple of years ago? This is the
Yeah,
new Namor?
that's
Okay, all right. But yeah, it's hard to keep up. It's hard to
well,
keep
that's the
up.
whole Marvel thing or DC thing now is if the creative team changes, they just start with the number one again. And that's
Right.
confusing because I'm like, well, then sign these people on for more than 3 issues then. Let's get these people on 10, 15 issues, then do a new number one, not after 4 or 5 issues. But look, it just came in the mail the other day.
Hey, where'd you get that?
Amazon. I think it was used.
Hey,
Someone had it used.
It lives.
It lives. I haven't got a chance to read it because it just came in. But I was thinking to myself, it was funny too, because I realized I never actually picked up a copy of Farm System. I got an advanced copy to read digitally, but I was like, oh, look at this came in. And I'm like looking for my Farm System book. And I'm like, oh, I never actually got it yet. So I'll have to pick that up. But I that's my plan is to grab Farm System. I always try to support the people that come on the podcast. But I was able to read, obviously, Farm System quite a while ago. So I did it earlier. I was talking to someone and I was like, where's issue 2 of your book? Like, what are you talking about? This issue 1 just came out. I'm like, oh yeah, I read issue 1 like in October and forgot that issue 1 came out in December. I was thinking it came out so long ago that I'm waiting for where's second volume of Farm System? I read it such a long time ago.
Right. Yeah, it gets nutty. Well, that's another reason why I like the graphic novel format. Yeah. Original book. Hey, you got it already. You got it all, one shot. 20 bucks.
And so you have
I hope you like the list. I hope you like the list. That was a weird journey. It was my Christmas story. I actually have an agent out in Hollywood who has had some interest in selling it, but a big portion of the print run got destroyed initially, and it was a nightmare getting it reprinted by the printers. They printed pages out of order. I'm telling you, man, that was some stressful days. But I'm actually going to, because of that, a large portion of it got destroyed. That is a very, very, very rare book. Only 2,000 made it survive the printing process. So I'm going to actually be repackaging that, updating it a little bit in the next year or so, and redistributing it, probably doing a Kickstarter or something.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a Christmas, like it's a fun, I like the things that are surrounding a certain, like I might like, maybe I won't read it until next Christmas season, just to have, have something, because there isn't that much that revolves around that time frame. A buddy of mine, Travis Gibb, just did the Holiday Spirits, and that was an anthology Christmas story kind of thing. And I like that because, like I said, there's not much that's like seasonally in that sense. Every once in a while, they do some like October for Halloween stuff, but like, I got to have time. I got to have something to read in that season to get myself feel like I'm in the season of Christmas. But maybe I'll read it ahead of time and then read it again then. But this is mostly text, right? There's some drawings and there's some illustrations in it, but
illustrated novel. I was inspired by like the format that your fellow Maine resident, Stephen King and Bernie Wrightson, my favorite illustrator, did a book decades ago called Cycle of the Werewolf. And I loved that format. I just loved that format. So I always wanted to do something like that. Text.
I mean, I like it.
And then illustrations. Yeah.
Well, it's nice because it breaks it up. And also one of the things I have a good imagination. But one of the things I love about comic books is I don't have to worry about imagining what the character looks like that you're trying to portray. In Farm System, I know all your characters, what they look like as the book progresses, because you gave me that in your illustrations. You said, this is what X, Y, and Z person looks like. This is what they're going to look like the rest of the book. When I go to read a novel, I'm just trying to come up with it. And then either a movie gets made or a comic book sequel or something comes out and I'm like, that's not what the character looks like. Because in my mind, I had it completely different. And so this helps a little bit gauge what, with illustrations in it, gives you a little bit of like, oh, okay, now I see what he's talking about, which is pretty cool. I'm excited for that. So yeah, I came in, I don't know, last week before that. Perfect timing, right? But I don't have my Farm System book yet. I promise you, Rich, I'm getting it.
We'll get you a copy. Contrarily, I like watching like a TV series like Next Generation and then reading the novels, and you've got all the voices in your head as you're reading the characters. That's cool. That totally elevates the novels.
And that's my love. I love how you pointed that out, because that's my love for adaptations via either the way it is now or the way like if this gets made into a movie or a TV show, that adaptation, 2 different mediums, as well as the opposite way. Like I just read the new Dune first issue from Boom. And again, same thing. You watch the movies, you watch the series, you watch the original movie, and you get these people that you remember, or these people you go, oh, okay, now I can see what this is in the book. I can hear their voices and things like that. So I love that mixed media of the industry that comic books is in. Is so many things are being made into movies or TV shows. We get to see that and read the book again and get, when I read Spider-Man now, maybe I get Tom Holland's voice in my head to read. I read Spider-Man, except for the fact that he's British, and I don't.
Yeah,
I watched the All Roads Lead to No Way Home the other night with my wife. It's like a 30-minute documentary about like the 8 Spider-Man films, and he has a strong accent, and Andrew Garfield has a slight accent. That both of them, like, that's not what Peter Parker says.
No.
But you can get Farm System where?
You can get it from Top Shelf off their website or IDW. Our distributor is actually Penguin Random House.
Yeah.
So it's Penguin Random House. It's on Amazon. Don't go to Amazon though. Go to your local stores.
Yes.
Amazon has enough of our money. Or you can go to my website, richkoslowski.com, and then I always personalize them with a nice sketch to make it a little more special. Same price as at the stores and all that. So yeah.
And your Penguin Random House through the book side. So bookstores have it too, right? Like a local bookstore, not just a comic book. Can comic book stores buy those too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I know there was a big kerfuffle with distribution last year and in the comic industry with Diamond and Penguin. And everything's a mess again. But things are starting, the dust is settling down. It was really disconcerting for me when I started because of this distribution, kerfuffle. I love that word. And I went to some stores and I'm like, hey, do you guys use Penguin Random House? Because that's my distributor. And they're like, no, we're not gonna, we're too. And I'm like, damn, well, they're not gonna have my book. But then I have to get out there and make sure I'm hitting all the shows and letting people know.
I have a friend who owns a bookstore in the downtown Bangor area near me, and he is a bookstore, so he can get trades and graphic novels to his place, but he can't get the comic books from Penguin Random House because he obviously he has a different, license or agreement with them. My buddy who owns the comic book store can get a little bit of both. It's a weird thing. And my buddy from the comic book store, he's not there on Mondays and Tuesdays, and that's when the comic books and stuff comes in. So he has his home address down the street as the address to deliver, and Penguin Random House won't deliver to his home because it's not the business address. And so it's like he's dealing with a whole kerfuffle in that sense as well, because Penguin Random House is also cheaper for shipping. So it's like this whole thing is just, dust will settle at some point. It will never be one distributor again, but dust will settle at some point and things will be a little bit more clear. But if you can get it at a bookstore, that's all you need to matter. Every town is a bookstore. And more towns have bookstores than they have comic book stores. So I would think that's a easier get. But I'll make sure if my buddy doesn't have it, I'll make sure that Jabron at Briar Patch in Bangor gets it on the shelf so that we can tell customers to go get it there too, because shop local. But can you buy it? You said you buy it from your website? Yep.
richkoslowski.com, topshelfcomics.com. So IDW website, because Top Shelf was absorbed by IDW Publishing. So that's the easiest places if you go online.
But I always say the creators are small businesses too, people. So like, yes, support your local store, but if there isn't one, going right to the creator is always a good thing too, because you're supporting, you got your copyright there.
Look, people, I have your copy waiting for you right here.
It's so nice and clean. I like that. Nicely bound. And
I do a little sketch inside. That's one of the main characters.
Look at you.
Armor Man.
That's awesome. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And so always we had a discussion multiple times on the podcast about someone who went on eBay to find something that I was like, if you just Googled so-and-so, the creator of the book, and went to his website, the guy paid 3 times as much on eBay than getting it from the person's website signed.
Right.
I was like, they had it as an option. It was like $25 signed and like maybe a little remark on it and shipped to you for free. And the person paid like $75 on eBay for the #1 issue without anything like that, plus shipping. And I was just like, just do some research, just Google, just Google people. And then also go to the creators' websites. A lot of people have them for the exact same cost. And you get that little bonus feature of personalization and helping a small business as well. So, and then you have other books that are available as well. I know you have other books, but are they also available on your website or at Top Shelf's website?
all my books are available. Top Shelf, actually, they just re-upped a contract for The King and BB Wolf, which was my third book with them. But they're out. These are have just run out, and with them merging with IDW and shuffling through inventory and all that stuff, so they're in a transitional period a little bit still. But some of the books are only available if you can find them back issue bins and so forth at stores. But I do have copies of The King, BB Wolf, Three Fingers, and my Three Geeks series on my website. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I still have all first prints on all those books. So
that's awesome. I do, like I said, I really, really enjoyed the book. I think the connection personally with me, my love for baseball and minor league baseball, and my love for superheroes and comic books. It's also what I like to say to people. It's really hard, and you probably admit to this too, to create a book about superheroes that's not in the big two, because whenever someone thinks about superheroes nowadays, I mean, it hasn't been. There's only been a few like, oh my gosh, your Invincibles and your Redeemables, where people have been able to like capture the audience's attention with superheroes. And I think you did a great job taking it a different way. And instead of just making a superhero book about a superhero who saves, fights crime, you did it a different way, which is very good. So
I appreciate that. And the focus, I've had this trouble too. Oh, there's a new superhero book by an independent company. I don't know anything about this character or their background. I'd have to start at ground zero and get to embrace this character. Well, the genius who did this mold, let's say, of what I'm doing, Kurt Busiek with Astro City. He developed he built a world, Astro City, and he injected all these different characters in there that you've never heard of, the Samaritan, and all these characters. You don't have to be aware of them. You get immersed in his stories right away. And it's like, I don't know anything about any of these characters, but I'm just right away engrossed in this. They're telling stories that are very accessible. And hopefully with my book, Farm System, it's more about a system and the setup and the marketing and all that people can all relate to. You don't have to know any of these characters. You already are aware and of this type of a structure in our world, so you can right away dive into the story and you get it. They're selling contracts for these guys. They're trying to put these guys on teams. I can relate to that. I don't need to know who they are. It doesn't even matter. It's all about the system. That's what Astro City did too, so brilliantly. Yeah. Got to give him a lot of props, Kurt Busiek with Astro City. In
the peripheral part of it, if you have a friend or a family member or someone close to you that's a sports fan that you want to get into comic books, that's another thing. It's not a quote unquote sports book. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, the idea, like this is a, book about basketball. This is a book that has that you would get and understand. And maybe it's a gateway to them reading other books, either by you or other people, because they got into a book they really like. So, and it's a graphic novel, which makes it it's all right in there in their hands. They don't have to worry about finding issue 3 or issue 4 or whatever. It's right there in a beautifully bound book. You can get over at Rich's website. I appreciate it. You need to thank your daughter too for helping you get us on. So that's a big she's an all-star of the day. She gets a star.
I'm old. I'm a dinosaur, and my daughter early on. You guys don't see any of that, but we couldn't get my mic working. So of course I had to get my IT specialist, my 20-year-old daughter, in here. I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden everything started working. So gremlins.
I did IT work when I was right out of high school. So I'm 36. So 18 years ago, I did IT work. I worked at Best Buy, and I haven't done it since then, basically. And I got an email from my grandfather in Florida asking why his email is not working. And I was like, I don't even know how to use these things anymore, honestly. So having the people around you to help is good. And having your daughter to help was excellent, because without it, we wouldn't be able to get on, talk about your book and talk about comic books. So again, thank you to your daughter, and thank you to you for coming on. And you have a website, you said richkoslowski.com?
Yes, richkoslowski.com. Here's the spelling, folks. This is low tech. Look at, we're not going to put it up on the screen, but Rich Koslowski, a good, fine Polish name.
And
.com.
And are you on any social medias? No offense if you're not, but are you
Facebook, just Facebook? If something comes out like Instagram or TikTok, like I call it, any of those, there's a lag time with me, or even email. It comes out, and then 6 years later, I'm on it. Maybe.
Well, nowadays you can just focus on the 6 years later, it came out and then went away and you didn't have to get on it.
That's how I'm sure.
Get
Is
stuff
this thing
done.
gonna take? Is this thing gonna last? Is this Sonic the Hedgehog thing gonna even last? Or am I wasting my time?
And
So,
thank God it did, because
Yeah, right.
now you have a career. I mean, let's say thank you, Sonic. That's what you had to say, right? Thank you, Sonic. Thank you so much, Rich. I really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day, and happy New Year, happy Martin Luther King Day, and good luck with the book sales. And good luck with number 2. You have to let us know when it's out, and we'll get it. We'll reread it, and then we'll talk to you again about the next issue, next
All right.
volume, I should say. Thank you.
Thank you very much.